a little bit of experience, I know it's non-paying, but it's an opportunity for you to get some continuous experience.
Means to an end. So please think about areas, because that is critical to the application, is to a lot of applications, let me put it that way. Is that medical experience, that volunteerism, that leadership, personal statement, letters of recommendation. What makes you different? Why are you different in a good way? Not in a bad way, in a good way. That kind of goes into that application process. And you've got the numbers over here that we've talked about. And then it comes to us, and then we look at if you're interviewable, and you go from there to the interview. Then it's just how does all that go? What is your competition like that year? It doesn't mean that you wouldn't be a good doctor, but if there are 95 slots and 95 people seem to be better than you and you're 96, you just may not get in that year. But if you really want to be a physician, a lot of people don't get in the first time. That's no big deal. The real trick is if you didn't get in, find out why, work to repair that, remedy that, add to that, whatever it is, come back the next year. I mean, maybe we see now's not right time for you, you're just not ready, okay? You'll be more successful the next year. There are a lot of tricks to the interview in that regard that I might say that as much as, yeah, it's always nice to have a backup plan, but if the backup plan in the interview supersedes your desire to be a physician, then I might say, do you really want to be a physician? What I mean by that is if I were to say, okay, well, let's just hypothetically say you don't get in med school this year, what are you going to do? Oh, I've already applied to law school and I plan to go there. No, what do I want to hear? I want to say I'm going to be disappointed. I'll need to find out why, because this is what I want to do. This is what I meant to do. I'll find out why I didn't get in. I'll try to remedy. I'll reapply next year. Yes, oh, by the way, I have had this coursework that should discontinue for the next 5 years and I don't get in, there may have to be a reality check where I'm going to have to say I'm not getting in, and obviously I need to have a backup plan. That's different than the backup plan almost superseding the fact that you're in that interview to go to medical school. You see that difference, as subtle as it may be, to us it speaks volumes.
Would there be, if you didn't get in, would there be any feedback, like just given to you automatically, or would you have to follow up?
No, you would have to ask for it.
Okay.
Because that puts it on you to show your maturity, your forward thinking, your need to come back, your perseverance, your initiative. See, little things like that say a lot to us. Okay, instead of us spoon feeding you, at this level, you've got to show us that you have got some of those traits that are going to be necessary to be successful in med school. So we kind of look at those kind of things as yard skills.
I'm an engineering major, and a couple of my engineering classes have brought my GPA like lower than I want it to be. Will that be looked at, or is it just your numbers?
Yeah, that's a good question. When you look at the GPA, you've got biology, chemistry, physics, math, then you've got all the others, and then you've got your total. So they are separated out in that regard, okay? They are also, we look at the transcript, like I mentioned a while ago. So we do look at particular courses. I'm not as familiar with an engineering curriculum as perhaps to answer you, but let's just say you had 2 Ds in organic. Even though your overall GPA might have pushed to 3.4, you could argue with me, well, it's almost a 3.6 or it's a little bit low. Yeah, but those 2 Ds are going to stand out big time. So it does, what is the course? You know, what did you make in the course? It's not that you can't ever get in without a D and F. That's a rare bird unless you go back and show us that that D and F was at a time when you were not directed toward medicine. And that's when that second, you go back and get a master's. You go back and start another degree, and now here are the great grades. I deal with a lot of students who come before me, and sometimes I have to say, you know, you were not in your undergraduate years ready for medicine, because here's just, and you can't get rid of it. I said, you just got to start over. Now, how do you start over? You can get a master's. You can just start taking courses. Make A's, though. You can't afford to be making less than that, because if you can't make A's taking courses at this point in your life, 1 at a time, 2 at a time, how are you going to get through medical school? So there are lots of those kinds of, that's just an example of the feedback that we give you to help you get to where you want to be. Jeremy, you want to come in? Would that be fair to say anything? Any other tricks to trade? Have you been on any
agree. I mean, in her situation, just because I know, maybe it's my Clemson, coming from Clemson, I'm seeing people going through the engineering thing, I'd probably look at that as, depending on what the grades were, I would take it into consideration that it was engineering. I would consider more as science. And that, again, having not seen the numbers, it would depend on a lot of things. But if the science grades were good, there was a few engineering courses, and you're wanting to go to medical school.
And that MCAT came in at,
Yeah.
29.30 as opposed to 25, where, you see, we look at it, it all comes together.
And you're a good interviewer, you've done some extra pictures. I mean, people come in all the time with borderline GPAs, average MCAT, and then go boot the interview out of the park, and then, we think they're great applicants. So, the intangibles mean a lot. Just because you have what you consider to be borderline numbers doesn't mean you should consider yourself not be a good applicant, because that's not the case. Because there's a whole heck of a lot more to being a good medical student than grades. Because some of the, the absolute best people in our class aren't the top of the class, in my opinion.
Question again, if you don't leave, feel comfortable, because we can stay around, don't feel like we've got things to do, but we'll keep going as long as we are helping. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
You were talking earlier about being out of state to having ties to South Carolina through Clemson. Are there specific quotas, or how much harder is it to get in that way?
I would answer it this way. If you look at the number of South Carolina residents who are in the class, it's probably 98%. 12% are going to be out-of-staters but with close South Carolina ties. Maybe 0.5% might be somebody who is really out-of-state without a tie. That would be very rare. They have to be, they would have found the cure for cancer. We thought, we would accept that. So does that help you? That's probably the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So say someone, you kind of touched on this, but the gap between undergrad and going to med school, if there was a year where you took just personal time for world traveling or things like that, are you at a disadvantage in that way if you weren't building up your resume? Okay.
No, you're not at a disadvantage. Now, it would be the quality of that year. You might, as an example, if you say, well, I went with a beachcomber for a year. I might go, gosh, man, you've been out of the classroom for a year, you've been laying on the beach, and now boom, you're supposed to get back into med school and charge for it. That's going to be the best, you see. So it has to do with what were you using that year to accomplish? What have you done with that year? How can you be sure that I know you are not out of the routine of the classroom? So, no, you're not at a disadvantage, but now I'm allowed to investigate what did you do during that year. Where, if you didn't have a year, then I can't investigate that. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
I was going to ask Jeremy to share a day in the life of a med student. Get up in the morning, what time do you get up? Say you're in the thick of the semester, and things are just piled, to the max. And what would be, describe a day to us?
I've been having a rough week last week. Well, if I'm getting ready for a test, if I got a lot of stuff going on, I'll probably get up about 6 o'clock. Usually have class at 8, so I'm get up because I like to kind of take my time getting ready, have some breakfast, walk the dog, have some coffee. Sometimes I'll study a little bit, especially now that I got farm. Flashcards are everywhere. So I go through some flashcards, maybe getting ready for a farm test. Class schedule kind of varies. Usually, right now, what we have on Mondays and Tuesdays, we'll have 4 hours of lecture in the morning. Anywhere from 2 to 3 on a terrible day, 4 in the afternoon. That almost never happens. It's usually only 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Wednesdays are half days. Except for me, I have admissions on Wednesday afternoons. Thursdays are like Mondays or Tuesdays, and Fridays are generally half days, which are nice. When I get out of class, I usually go to the gym, depending on my workload. If I have a terrible week, I'll be bad and I'll skip the gym. Then I go home and I eat and I study. I study a little bit more than the average student, and I have to kind of preface it with that because if I tell you how much I study, it'll freak you out because that's just the type of student I am. I don't get things on the first try. I do okay as far as grades and everything go, but I have to work very hard at it. So I go home after dinner about 5 or 6. I study until about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And then I go to bed because my brain just does not work after 10 or 11 o'clock. You can try to force something in my brain after that time, but there's no point whatsoever. So I've never once pulled an all-nighter, ever. Will never do it because it makes me dumber the next day. But that's pretty much my average day. You know, on a weekend, every other weekend, I go up. I either come up here to see Ginger. She's my fiance. She's right here. Wave to everybody. I come up to see her, or she comes down here to see me. So that's kind of like, weekends are a little bit more laid back because I got to take some time off. But I still study a lot. So, but when she's here, maybe I'll kind of tone it down a little bit, but not much. But again, I'm a little bit of a freak that way because I'm just that way. I study a little bit more. Anyway, that's kind of what it's like.
And just to kind of maybe expound a little bit on the class time. He said 4 hours in the morning, so you're all, if I'm not mistaken, you're going to be in one big, large classroom with the 80 students.
Yeah.
You all are going to be together. Yeah. And you'll have a lecture for an hour, maybe a break, and you just back to back, or how does the 4 hours?
There's 50 minutes and there's a 10-minute break between each lecture. A lot of times in the afternoon, we instead of having like 2 hours of lecture, and then we'll actually go into smaller type stuff in a lot of cases. But between every lecture, there is a 10-minute break, unless the professor gets off track, keeps the lecture, which happens to be.
You're pretty much one subject after another, with the breaks in between. PowerPoint after PowerPoint. The PowerPoints are usually on computer. The lectures are usually recorded. So there is no attendance policy. So do you go to class, Jeremy, or do you skip class?
I go to class.
But are there students that never come to class?
There are some that don't come to class.
That never come to class.
Well, there are some.
And are they?
That's a slippery slope because the people who don't ever come to class are, as a general rule, I gotta be careful how I say this, not in the top third of the class. They do fine, they pass, but the nice thing about coming to class is you have the opportunity to ask questions. You're going to focus better than if you're listening to something on iTunes, you know, because I've had to listen to something on iTunes. I've had to miss a lecture before. I've been sick or I've had other things to do. Sometimes you just really fall behind and you have to focus on something else. Time management issue, you might have to do that. But you don't focus as well when you listen to something on iTunes sometimes. So you don't get as much out of it. But yeah, people do skip class.
But there are also resources, ancillary things for you, like the video, the tapes, the audio, that sort of thing. But also, do you have the academic support center? You know, we have the academic support center here. Is that something that's very intense there?
Our academic support center consists of each other and our professors mainly. I mean, the professors have the open office hours. I mean, I've never once had a problem getting hold of a professor. I've never once had a problem getting help. I mean, I sent my pharmacology professor an email at 10 o'clock last night and got a response at 11:15. From his BlackBerry. I mean that's not just that professor. That's the type of response you do get. And I think that's kind of one of the things that makes USC unique is the type of relationship you have with faculty. In gross anatomy, our course director gave us all his cell phone number, and I called him several times at his house. And his wife answered the phone, gave me to him, asked him to call. You have that type of relationship with your faculty, and that gives you the help you need. And when you don't utilize the faculty, you utilize each other. You form study groups.